Welcome to Bankless, where we explore the frontier of internet money and internet finance. This is how to get started, how to get better, and how to front run the opportunity. This is Ryan Sean Adams. I'm here with David Hoffman, and we're here to help you become more bankless. David, how you doing?
Absolutely fantastic and much more knowledgeable after we just got done with this L2 implementers panel. We brought on 3 different individuals who are all working on 3 different projects, who are all implementing their application on a specific L2. So we brought on Matt Finestone, who works for business development at Loopring, Justin Moses, the CTO of Synthetix, and we also brought on Robbie Ferguson, who is the co-founder behind Immutable X, which is a ZK-Rollup based NFT exchange. And so the through line behind all 3 of these individuals is that they are working for a protocol that is building something on an L2. They are not an L2, they are building something on an L2. So there's an important differentiator there. And so we talked to them about what it's been like going through the research phase, going through the building phase, and where they are now, and then also where the roadmap is ahead of them. And I found it extremely informative, and I'm sure the listeners will as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 things I want to say here. The reason that this is top of mind and relevant is because Ethereum gas fees are high, and it needs to scale outside of what we call kind of mainnet Manhattan into layer 2, which are these other chains that represent kind of like the suburbs, as we've talked about before. So this is a very topical issue right now that's really facing Ethereum. And what we think is DeFi is going to have to completely re-architect itself into this layer 2 mode. The other thing I wanted to say is if you're kind of new to layer 2, what we're talking about is layer 2 is basically a chain that is not on the Ethereum mainnet, but is secured by the Ethereum mainnet. This is different than a side chain, which might integrate with Ethereum, but is not secured by Ethereum. That is the distinction between a layer 2 solution and something that might be a side chain or another non-Ethereum chain that's not as well secured by Ethereum. And the thing about this panel is these are all application developers. And that's why David and I wanted to get folks that were in the trenches actually building on top of these layer 2 solutions to talk, because they can give the most credible perspectives on what's working and what's not, because they're actually like users of the product. They're consumers of the layer 2. They made a strategic choice, an investment choice to build on top of layer 2. So if they're doing that, if they're investing in it, then we wanted to know why. And we figured that they would have the best perspective on what's real, what's not, and when all of this stuff is coming and happening. And I think they gave us this. So if you are looking to try to understand what Ethereum scalability trajectory looks like, what layer 2 looks like on Ethereum, this is the perfect podcast, I think, to get up to speed.
There were 2 parts in this conversation that I really enjoyed. The first is where we asked about the research process. So, each one of these guys works for a team, and there was a research process to go into which L2 was the best choice. But before we asked that, we asked, well, why did you even stick with Ethereum? Like, what you could have gone elsewhere. Why didn't you? And I think that was one of my favorite parts in this conversation. And then the other favorite part of this conversation came at the very end, where we asked about their thesis or theories about, does the value capture that's going on L2 actually compete with Ethereum and Ether, the asset, or are they value generative to Ethereum and Ether, the asset? I thought that was a really fantastic part of this conversation.
You guys are really going to enjoy this conversation, but before we get into it, we want to tell you about the fantastic sponsors that made this episode possible.
So as you guys know, there is always a debrief at the end of every single episode that we reserve for the premium subscribers to the Bankless program. But we want to give the free listeners just a taste of what those debriefs are like. So if you are interested in hearing the debrief, you can stay tuned to after the episode, and you will be able to hear the 35 minute conversation that Ryan and I have after the episode, where we talk about our takeaways, our lessons, our thoughts that we had during the episode, just me and Ryan. So if you are interested in that content, again, it's at the end of the episode. It's free for everyone this time. And if you are interested in the future, and if you are interested in accessing the future debriefs, you can subscribe to the Bankless Premium RSS feed. There's a link in the show notes to get that done. I thought this debrief was pretty cool, and so check it out. It's at the end. AAVE is a borrowing and lending protocol on Ethereum, and just recently released AAVE version 2, which has a ton of cool new features that makes using AAVE even more powerful. With AAVE, you can leverage the full power of DeFi, money Legos, yield, and composability all in one application. On AAVE, there are a ton of assets that you can deposit in order to gain yield, and all of those same assets can also be borrowed from the protocol if you have deposited collateral. Here you can see me getting a 200 USDC loan against my portfolio of a number of different DeFi tokens and ETH. I'll choose a variable interest rate because it's a lower rate than the stable interest rate option, but I could choose the stable interest rate option if I wanted to lock that interest rate in permanently. One of AAVE's V2 features is the ability to swap collateral without having to withdraw your assets, trade them on Uniswap, and then deposit them back into AAVE. AAVE does all of this for you, all in one seamless transaction, so you don't have to repay loans in order to change the collateral you have backing them. Check out the power of AAVE at aave.com. That's AAVE.com. If you want to live a bankless life, you need to get a Monolith DeFi Visa card. Monolith is a 1-2 punch of both an Ethereum smart contract wallet and an accompanying Visa card that lets you spend the money that you have in your Ethereum wallet everywhere where Visa is accepted. When you swipe your Monolith Visa card at the grocery store or at a restaurant, it actually makes a transaction on the Ethereum blockchain that spends some of the money you hold in your Monolith wallet. It's insanely cool, and it's one of the best tools out there for living a bankless but still normal life. Monolith also offers ONRAMP services for getting your fiat money into the world of DeFi. So it's trivial to top up your Monolith card if you ever need to, and your deposited money goes straight into your non-custodial wallet, so your money is never held by a centralized intermediary. Because Monolith is native Ethereum infrastructure, the money you hold in your Monolith wallet still has the power of DeFi behind it. Swapping assets on Uniswap or earning yield in DeFi is at your fingertips. Go to monolith.xyz and sign up to get your Monolith Visa card today. All right, Bankless Nation, we are here with Matt Finestone of Loopring, business development at Loopring. We're also here with Justin Moses, who's the CTO of Synthetix, and then also last but not least, Robbie Ferguson, who is the co-founder of Immutable, which is the studio behind Gods Unchained. So Matt, Justin, and Robbie, welcome to Bankless, and we're so excited to have you guys on the show today.
Thanks for having us, David.
So L2 implementers, assemble. Gentlemen, you guys have all been invited here because you share something in common. You have all built and deployed functioning applications to the Ethereum main chain and has seen success and adoption in the usage of your apps, which is already a feat. But there's something even more unique about the respective projects that all of you guys work on and that each of you guys have implemented or are in the process of implementing, which is your guys' app being deployed on an Ethereum L2. Synthetix is offloading much of its infrastructure onto optimistic rollups. Loopring is building a complete payments and exchange platform on ZK-Rollups, and Immutable is building an NFT asset exchange platform also on ZK-Rollups. So again, we brought Justy, Robin, and Matt here to tell us the story of their app, their need to scale, and their process thus far. So let's start with you, Matt, and Loopring. Tell us about the nature of your app. What does it do? And at what point did you realize that Ethereum's main chain capacity just wasn't going to be enough?
Thank you, David. Yeah, really excited to be here with fellow L2 implementers. So Loopring is a bit different than I think my compatriots here, in the fact that we were a protocol, and then we built products, and then we built a new protocol ourselves, the layer 2 protocol, to augment the products. So the application did not force us to kind of look elsewhere for a layer 2. We built it ourselves. So we're kind of a layer 2 protocol and layer 2 products. But yeah, we realized long ago that we had no business doing what we were trying to do on Ethereum Layer 1. We were building order book exchanges. The experience was really poor on Ethereum Layer 1. So we looked for scalability. This was early on. Rollups were just kind of being whispered around. And we built our ZK rollup. specifically to scale our order book exchange. So we built an application specific ZK rollup, and then we start learning and we actually have users and iterating. So the product changes a bit, and then we enhance the protocol to support AMMs on layer 2 as well, and then payments as well. So what came from just like an order book DEX protocol really turned into an order book and AMM exchange and payment ZK rollup protocol. Yeah, it's a bit of a going all over the place there, but as you see, we kind of did like full loop, no pun intended, honestly. And yeah, that's where we're at right now.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about how and why building an order book exchange on the Ethereum L1 was such a pain. Like why did that not really work out so well?
Right. Very briefly, the biggest thing is to get liquidity on order books, you really need market makers or liquidity providers that are in control of their quotes, what they're quoting to buy and sell, and 15-second blocks and gas prices to submit and potentially cancel does not allow them to do their thing and kind of quote as the market's moving, be quick and cheap, like low latency, low fee. So it's really like a non-starter. It's maybe one of the worst things you could do if you're trying to replicate that legacy style order book on a blockchain. But layer 2 allows us to really replicate that performance. You feel like you're on Coinbase Pro or Kraken, except you're on this layer completely coupled to Ethereum base layer security.
Right. So market makers, even with Ethereum before scale was really an issue in the way that gas prices were today, those like 15-second block times and even pennies worth of a transaction, it was already like without the congestion that we have today, it was already a poor experience and people who are managing order books need to be able to basically have instantaneous control, not 15-second delays or pennies at a transaction. So even before Ethereum was congested, the L1 was never ever going to be able to do what you guys wanted to do.
That's a great point, actually. I didn't think of that kind of theme here, that Justin and Synthetix were forced after like large success on layer 1 already, and potentially same with Robbie. We couldn't do what we wanted to do even a few years ago. That's very true. And I guess we'll jump to this, but the layer 1 not being suitable for this type of behavior is actually kind of what spawned AMMs, where these market makers don't need to jump in and be quick. You're just kind of dumping your money and letting a function do the thing. So it kind of AMMs came out of the environment that optimized for it.
Yeah, Matt, they really came out of necessity, right? It was due to this constraint of basically, low amounts of transactions per second that the automated market maker model became so successful and so popular. Maybe, Robbie, for you, kind of same question. Can you tell us a bit about the nature of your application and at what point you decided that you needed layer 2?
Yeah, of course. The point was actually really early. When we were first launching the original sale of Gods Unchained, it was at the same time Fcoin was doing their exchange listing. And I don't know if everyone watching this remembers, but the way they incentivized that was basically as poor as you get. Was they incentivized transactions in the ETH network with high gas fees. And so for the first time ever, we were seeing gas fees of like 150, 180. We did some innovations then, which were fine, but fundamentally we did the maths. We were like, okay, if we even get to 30% the size of Hearthstone, so a medium-sized game, we are taking up some absurd amount of the Ethereum blockchain via NFT transactions, particularly because NFT transactions are a ton more expensive than just ERC20 transfers. Like you can transfer $1 million worth of ERC20 value for a fixed cost. You're transferring in $1 million worth of NFT value in Gods Unchained, that looks like probably 500,000 cards. So there's a fundamental difference between fungible tokens and non-fungible tokens. And so in picking a solution, really there were no available solutions, I would say, 3 years ago. There were ideas being thrown around. State channels have yet to come to life. Plasma chains also really have not been implemented in a mainstream way. And this, I think, was what drove people to things like new layer ones or side chains. And then we had this magical thing called a zero knowledge proof come out, which I remember being obsessed with when I first heard about it, especially the different parables of ways of explaining it, like the parable of the cave, or you know, the numbers and how it's all kind of like probabilistically determined, which gave me some rough approximation of the maths, which is probably like 1% of what it actually is. But this is, as Vitalik says, like the way it will scale. And so I think we determined that solution pretty quickly, that this was the most obvious way to scale, in particular NFT transfers, because they were so problematic on Ethereum. And then it was just a matter of choosing, well, okay, who do we think the best kind of rollup provider is? ZK-Rollups a bit of NFTs, just because the lack of withdrawal time. Right now, I think optimistic solutions work better if you want generalized programmability, which is, I think, why, you know, Synthetix is going with optimism, which is also an excellent solution. So yeah, I think that was the genesis of when we knew, and also when we knew there'd be a solution was when we first saw traction and deployment of rollups.
So to be clear, Robbie, you are going with a ZK rollup type solution in the same way that Matt's team is with Loopring. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I think we use slightly different providers. I think Loopring, do you guys use Meta Labs?
We use ourselves. Loopring protocol was the first ZK rollup as of 14 months ago. So that's our kind of provider. That's why I was kind of saying we're a bit of a different beast. We're a bit of a different beast. Like we operate across the stack. But no hard feelings.
No. Very cool. Very cool. I'm sorry I didn't know that. I think I mean, creating those proofs is bloody hard. That's why we partnered there. And ultimately, I see there's a few layers of the stack here. There's proof providers. There's a protocol on top of that. So I almost call that like an AWS infrastructure right down the bottom, which is clearly what you guys are providing. And then you have, okay, well, what networks or products are built on top of that? And then you have applications. Then you have OpenSea, SuperRAM, marketplaces, games, which sit on top of that protocol. So we went for this level. We said we don't need to make the magic maths. I don't think we wanted to do that. And there's a real need. Exactly. Literally moon math. And the implementation of it for NFTs is already tremendously difficult. So we took on that challenge instead.
All right, so let's turn to Justin at Synthetix. Justin, Synthetix never really was destined to be an L2 in the same way Loopring or Gauss Unchained / Immutable was, but you guys have turned into an L2 just simply out of necessity because Ethereum L1 is congested. So let's talk about a little bit of, again, the nature of your app, the nature of the economic activity that goes on in Synthetix. And at what point did you guys realize that, you know, L2 was not just like an option for you guys, but something that you guys must do?
So Synthetix is a decentralized exchange, a little bit like Loopring, Matt was saying. I guess the big difference for us is we're a bit more like Uniswap in that we're peer to contract and we don't have an order book as such. What's actually happening is people stake a token, SNX token, and from that, they can issue a stablecoin, and then they can basically reprice that stablecoin into any other synthetic asset. So basically what we have is this big shared debt pool that's comprised of all these different synthetic assets. The more people that go into synthetic ETH, the more the debt pool is denominated in ETH, which is kind of cool because it means that you can get this idea of like infinite liquidity. You can take any synth and 100% convert its value to any other synth that is supported. But the problem with that is that means that it's all shared, like it's all shared state. And as those of you who've ever written any Solidity know that tends to mean things like, you know, you're looping over every synth in the system to figure out how much debt there is. And this stuff is very gas intensive. So I think for us, it's sort of somewhat two-pronged. I actually think you're a little off, David, on that assertion that we were never destined for L2. Like if you talk to Kane, he's always been very much that he wants the experience like Matt was saying. He wants it fast and snappy like a traditional DEX. And so, you know, we obviously couldn't do that on L1. But on top of that, we have these very onerous gas fees that are just preventing, you know, regular people who, you know, might only be staking, you know, a few hundred SNX for actually doing anything, because the code that we have is fairly complex. You know, with some people looking at $100, $200 worth at the time of trying to do simple things and minting, or, you know, spending, you know, a few $100s worth of ETH in order to earn maybe $50 worth of SNX. So for us, it was really those two factors required us to go over. And to answer your second question, I think it was actually in DevCon 5 in Osaka when we saw the Unipig demo. We saw, for those of you who were there or might have seen the video, basically, the Plasma team who later became the Optimism team, they worked closely with Hayden and the Uniswap team, and they put together this Unipig. And just seeing it, just seeing the tactile response. My background's like full stack web engineering, and I was shocked. And when we did our demo on L2, it was funny because our front end engineers, we were now dealing with like regular kind of concurrency problems that we just never had with Ethereum. We're like, we have multiple users using the app. We need to basically use WebSockets or something to tell them in real time what's happening to the shared state, which we never had to worry about, with L1. So yeah, for us, the Unipig demo, which was was it October 2019, was definitely the moment we started to take a lot of interest in Optimistic, and we started talking to them in earnest.
So guys, let's dive a little bit deeper into kind of the selection process of layer 2. And I want to start here. I know none of you are, let's call it, chain maximalists of any sort. I'm pretty certain. I think that you guys are looking out for your users' best interest. That's what application developers do. They want to provide the best user experience and the best application possible for users. And of course, when you think about layer 2, you could also go in another direction, which is a non-Ethereum blockchain. And there are a ton of what we'll call them ETH killers, in quotes, out there that are promising, low gas fees, no gas fees, infinite amounts of block space, kind of the all-you-can-eat buffet. Please come to my blockchain, Justin, from 6. We want your app here. And yet all three of you have chosen to stay within the Ethereum ecosystem. And not only that, but have chosen the security model of Ethereum as well. So it's not only kind of a side chain based on the Ethereum virtual machine, you're actually choosing to go down this even harder road where the security of your rollup is actually based on Ethereum. So there's some really new technology that you're cutting your teeth on. I want to know why, and I think listeners want to know why. Why did you stick with Ethereum, and what was the rationale behind the selection of the layer 2 that you've chosen? Let's start with Justin on this question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think for us. I don't know if any of you know this, but when we were Haven, which is what Synthetix was before it sort of rebranded, I was actually working on porting our contracts to EOS. I did it for maybe 6 weeks. I was brushing up on C++ and writing code and getting involved and really trying to get write open source code, write continuous integration that pulled together Docker containers and spun everything up and tested everything. And whenever I tried to ping the community on EOS, it was just crickets. Like it was just nothing. And I was pinging different block producers and trying to get them to help. And it really just re-illustrated how strong the Ethereum developer community is. It's massive. There's just so much infrastructure, there's so much tooling, and there's so much momentum there. And I, obviously I'm an engineer, right? So I tend to, maybe I over-index on that. But my experience very strongly is that Ethereum's developer community is so rich that it would be, very hard to move away from it. And I haven't seen any, ETH killer that has showed me that there's any developer community, anything quite like it. So for us, it doesn't make any sort of sense to move over to another one.
Can we talk as well, well, I've got you on this, Justin, about why the optimistic rollup design specifically? What were the advantages of that versus the other rollups or other ETH layer 2 scaling solutions out there?
Well, I mean, I think assuming we're sticking on Ethereum, I mean, for us, obviously, the ZK, they're not having to worry. The 1 week withdrawal period is obviously, it's obviously a better user experience. There's no doubt about that. But for us, a big part of the decision is how complex our smart contracts are. Still to this day, there's no easy way to port smart contract logic, into anything ZK at all, right? Onto L2. So the solution is to try to take a little part of it, right? Whatever you need to sort of take onto L2 and create some sort of ZK, compatible solution and create it. And a big part of the decision for us, particularly for me, is maintaining these two different code bases. So I'd like to talk more about this at some point, and this is a good piece, but there's a lot of complexity in now maintaining state on both, and not just state, but also contracts code on both L1 and L2. Like, I'd like to think of it as a new dimension. Now we have our contracts deployed on different networks, right? Like, Covan will have it, but now we also have this dimension of layer 2. And the more, the more cognitive load you put on your engineering team, the harder it is to get things done. So for me, like a really big part of the appeal of Optimism was being able to port more or less exactly as is the contract code that we have on L1 and run it in L2, and then have two separate systems, which is more analogous to the shards. And what I imagine is going to eventually happen is we are going to probably see different L2s, and there'll be capital moving between these different layer 2s. And we need to handle how that's going to happen. I don't actually think it's necessarily going to be winner takes all. So for us to be able to take our logic and move it over wholesale, it's a huge value add of Optimism.
Robbie, let's talk about the process over at Immutable. When you guys were realizing that the Ethereum L1 wasn't going to be enough for all the data that you guys would need to be able to put on chain, did you guys ever look elsewhere other than Ethereum? And if you did, what was the rationale behind why you decided to stick with Ethereum?
Yeah, of course we looked elsewhere. We even had offers, massive grants from different chains. You know how like these things go. This was actually a really simple question for me though. And ultimately, I am an ETH maximalist. I think a bit contrary to the original thing. And the reason is not just inherently, hey, this is what I like. It's I think I'm a decentralized maximalist, and Ethereum is really one of the only public blockchains which fulfills that criterion for me. The alternative blockchains simply, like, either their consensus mechanisms are so centralized that if I hired a crackpot team of hitmen with $2 million, I could go crack it. Or if the government cracked down, they could go crack it. Or if the CEO of the company of their centralized blockchain, don't know who I could be referencing here, was to leave, there'd be a significant impact to the blockchain. So I think, just speaking pretty candidly, there's very few decentralized alternatives. So my question is, what is the point then? Why don't I run a marketplace on a database on my computer? Why don't I just do another Steam? Like, the whole point of this is to give users self-custody, sensitive resistance, and it's fundamentally decentralization and sovereignty over hard-capped assets and hard-capped money. So I don't think going halfway and just creating a nice experience for trading valuable things that is fundamentally vulnerable to the same things centralized markets are, is doing anything at all. The next thing I would say is, so that's why Ethereum. But the next thing I would say is it's not sufficient for me to have some sort of relationship with the Ethereum ecosystem. And I think there's a lot of wool being pulled over people's eyes here as well at the same time, which is, I think, I mean, and this is where I actually take my learnings from you guys, because I think you so cleverly articulated what are the value propositions of Ethereum, which in my mind are 4. ETH is a consumable, ETH is a capital asset, ETH is a store of value, and ETH is a form of economic bandwidth, guaranteeing via its security the operations that exist on that protocol. To me, you have to therefore rely on Ethereum security. Currently, the only scalability solutions which rely on Ethereum security are rollups. So I think that was partially why I chose that. Like, at the end of the day, you want to have the cost to attack the stuff you're trading to be the same as the cost to attack your rollups. I think Optimism has a slightly more linear cost to it to attack the proofs, but it's still correlated to Ethereum security. So still really good. And I think Justin was on the money with the fact that it's just way better for DeFi apps right now, an optimistic solution. So that was why ETH, and that was why rollups. And ultimately, at the end of the day, for customers, it's way better too. Like, ETH is where all the network effects are. It's where all the developers are. That's a really hard thing, even with $250 million, to buy, your own ecosystem of developers. It's just, that money will only go so far, and that people will be motivated by cash rather than the true kind of cultural genesis of a decentralized community, which we've seen on Ethereum today.
And so what about the research phase for Immutable and an L2? How did you guys come to a decision as to what L2 was the right L2 for you?
Yeah, so it's really just 2 decisions. It's one, what kind of So in my mind, the only L2s are rollups right now. And that's because the definition of an L2 is something which inherits the security of the L1. Rollups the only solution which do that currently. Other mechanisms like sidechains, useful. They have their own consensus mechanism. So you're not actually getting a security. They have bridges, and it's great for the ecosystem. And this is partially why Polygon said, hey, we want to be this, relationship to future ZK rollups and things like that. I'll be excited when they release one, and they can use us if they like, for NFTs. So I think that the first choice was out of rollups, which one? Zero knowledge was very clearly the choice for us. NFTs have a reduced need for EVM compatibility over complex smart logic, and we're also getting there. So Immutable X's implementation of a zero knowledge rollup with Starkware already has the prover on chain, which is able to basically take any EVM logic. We just don't have the language and tooling, which is going to get there this year. So that's future-proofed. And the main reason for NFTs is the instant withdrawals. So the benefit with ERC20s and a protocol like Synthetix is you can do things with liquidity bridges to kind of get around this problem with the withdrawal time. They're not perfect, but they're pretty good for fungible tokens. You can't do that for NFTs. If you have a one-of-a-kind crypto key, Axie, God's Unchained card, I can't, loan you or construct some liquidity bridge, which is going to give you early access to that capital. It's just impossible. So for us, those were the, a zero knowledge rollup was the only solution. Out of that, it was like, okay, well, what provider do we use? And Starkware was the obvious choice for us, $30 million from Sequoia, a really world-class team, and was future-proofing that as well.
All right, and last but not least, of course, Matt from Loopring. Was building on something else other than Ethereum ever even something that you guys could have considered?
Right. So first of all, it's such a pleasure to hear these guys speak, Robbie and Justin, and so like-minded or facing similar things. And I don't have much else valuable to say except for our own situation. But yeah, I really echo everything they said. Did we ever look somewhere? Here's another little fun tidbit, actually. Even before scalability was like the big pressure on us or the big thing we were trying to tackle, we actually did look elsewhere off Ethereum back 3 years ago. And I will up Justin's EOS. We actually deployed smart contracts for Loopring version 1 on Neo.
Wait, Neo, China's answer to Ethereum? That Neo?
That's right.
Okay.
And
can you kick someone from a call?
No, we'll just edit that out, Robbie, if we have to. No, it's okay, Matt. We all have those things that have happened in our past that we're trying to get over now. But tell us more.
Sure. No, I think it's a great learning moment. Loopring is actually a primarily Shanghai-based team. Most of our engineers, and I'm not there. I'm in Canada, but a big part of our team is there. And back then, it wasn't so obvious to some, even to me, even though I'd also consider myself, just a purely ETH person now by a long shot. Back then, it wasn't clear that you didn't want to deploy your things on other chains, not for scalability reasons, just for, this is maybe the Ethereum of China, or interoperability, different chains. Like the reasons are fuzzy now, looking way back then, but we deployed it, but it was really kind of like a tangential effort. And as soon as we did it, it kind of didn't work for certain technical quirky reasons, like the way their gas. It's actually kind of funny to think about it. They had like 2 types of gas, and like if you did a transaction that is below some type of like consumed gas, it's like free, if I remember correctly, but then it like spikes up. It's like a step function if you do anything a bit more complex. It was really, so actually the reason why we dropped it was because it was technically not feasible. That was before Ethereum just became the clear place where we wanted to focus our time. As Justin was saying, like the cognitive overhead and just the simplicity. So we actually looked elsewhere. So we have a bit of firsthand experience about dealing with crickets in a community, or just facing all those things. But it really was a different world back then in 2017.
What's worse, Matt, crickets or high gas fees is kind of the question, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. That's the first thing I thought of when you posed the question was like, user experience is not like, we all think like, okay, speed and cost. That's like actually way down the list on user experience. What's way higher is people, both users and devs, assets, liquidity, and like awareness, right? Like that is, those are prerequisites before anything else in user experience, which we think of like speediness and costliness. Like, so those are indeed the things about why Ethereum. Now, to get to the next point, when we tried to tackle scalability, it's funny, someone mentioned DevCon 5. For us, it was DevCon 4 in Prague, and just ZK rollups. I just remember it so clearly. People were talking about ZK rollups for scalability. And I remember just writing my team. I was the only one there, like, hey, what is this stuff? It sounds like it's a magic bullet to all of our problems. And back then there were no live ZK rollups. There was no, like, maybe there was the beginnings of thoughts about companies forming, but there was no Starkware in its current form, or Matter Labs, or really any live ZK rollup. So we became overnight a ZK rollup team, and we're not a bunch of cryptographers. As Robbie was saying, these proof systems are hard, but like our team turned into practitioners of zero knowledge cryptography. And really, we had a few great engineers leading us building the first ZK rollup from scratch, which was a huge effort. It took a year. It stopped everything we were doing. But yeah, we built it ourselves, and that's that. I forget the next part of the question. Why ZK over optimism?
I hadn't actually asked it yet, but that's exactly right. It seems like ZK Rollups was the rollup of choice for you guys, and it seemed really, really conducive to you guys from the get-go. It seemed like you guys never really had any doubts that ZK Rollups was the solution for you. What strengths did ZK Rollups have that really just made it crystal clear that it was the right path forward?
Right. So I may be mistaken here. Maybe somebody could correct, but I don't think optimistic rollups were a thing back then. I think rollups, right, like the idea of like a rollup, like generalized was, I guess it was a thing because people thought, okay, validity proof or fraud proofs, but like you didn't have debates, like cool debates now, like ZK versus optimistic. It was like, okay, rollups and like, yeah, you use these validity proofs. As far as I know, we only discussed that. We never thought of, I could be wrong, but then as we progressed and like we were mid-build and maybe the idea came out a bit, we were still very, very strongly in the ZK rollup camp because it does offer us what we need. We don't have those complex kind of arbitrary logic that Justin was describing. We were building order book exchanges, right? Which turned into order book exchanges plus payments plus AMM. So still just like specific functions we were tackling. So ZK was able to handle that. So that's kind of one reason. The other is indeed the fast withdrawal times. That's a big thing, which is live on Loopring now. It's really cool. You could exit. It used to be a big thing that people said, oh, you know, an hour wait, 2 hour wait is way too long. Now you could pay up to kind of eject from layer 2 in the next Ethereum block, 15 seconds. It might cost you like $60 or $70 right now, but then you don't wait. Something like that. So that was it. But really, it's the cold hard fact is like it was just the one that we were aware of. But when we did kind of become aware of optimistic rollups, we like the idea of validity proofs. Maybe we had like these naive debates which have since been answered. But I remember talking to the team and okay, what about optimistic rollups? It's going to be more generalizable. But we all said like we like the idea of just like validity proofs, like not waiting for fraud proofs after. I think we posed the question like, what happens if there's never any fraud on an optimistic rollups? Like the watchers never like win a bond or something like that. I don't know if that's even since been answered, but like that was like a thing. Like, okay, if everyone is too well behaved, then does everybody like let up their guard because nobody's actually like slashing people or winning like a challenged fraud proof? So like we had those early, probably now answered questions, but we just like the idea of validity proofs.
So I want to frame this question to the implementers, the avengers of implementing on layer 2 right now this way. So a lot of people, when they're seeing kind of Ethereum's congestion, as David sort of phrased it, but basically it's high gas fees. They're getting flash backs to 2017, where Ethereum had its, CryptoKitties moment, when basically, everyone realized that the CryptoKitties application was consuming too much of the Ethereum network, and oh my God, Ethereum had to scale. And then we also remember that the Ethereum scaling solutions at that time were not quite ready for prime time. There was like a lot of promise about state channels, for instance. Projects like Raiden would come and solve things. Then there was a lot of promise about Plasma, that Plasma was the next solution to scale Ethereum. There was even promise about ETH2. Hey, it's maybe it's right around the corner, kind of like, but we're not sure what the roadmap looks like. So this is a question I think only the implementers can answer. And this is the reason we brought people who are building apps to this conversation, is because you guys can drop the truth on us, right? Like no one else can. I mean, we bring on some of the layer 2 providers. They're all going to sell us the vision essentially and try to sell us the platform. But you guys are actually in the trenches building this shit. So what we want to know to the panel is layer 2 really happening this time? Like how far along are we? Is it here? I mean, because mainstream's coming, and they're coming right now. They're coming during this bull run. We got to be ready for them. How ready are we? Let's start with Matt on that question.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe you gave me this one because it's a softball pitch for me, because I could say it's not coming, it's here. Exclamation point. It's here. Like that's all Loopring does. Without layer 2, we wouldn't exist. We wouldn't have a product. We wouldn't have a protocol. So to the extent that like we have stuff to do every day and our users do stuff and there's volumes, that's all layer 2, live, mainnet, real value. So let's get that off right out of the way. It's here. Now it's time to learn and tweak and iterate, and everybody else is coming. We've been alone for the past year. Now mega popular apps are coming, Synthetix apps and protocols. So now, they're live. They have a function of their platform live on mainnet. So it's here. It's not just us. And it's really amazing, as all these builders know, when you actually have users and things are happening, you start improving, right? Like that's like compared to our ZK rollup last year, it was barely usable. Everything was gas intensive. You couldn't do that much stuff. Now it's like, it's more efficient, it's more flexible. So we're going to see that kind of inflection kick in, where people are learning from their L2 experiences, and everything is just, it's here. I'm so bullish. If people don't know that layer 2 is here and it's only getting better, then I hope this episode really, or maybe I don't want them, because that's a nice FUD thing against ETH, and I want it, I don't want it to just be realized overnight and then priced in that, oh yeah, this could do everything that we need it to. So I don't mind actually some apprehension or some other conspiracy theories that it's not coming, because that gives me more time.
Yeah, alpha is of course always opportunity, but Matt, at Loopring, you guys are still building stuff. You guys are still working on progressing Loopring. So if you aren't actually working on building the actual L2 platform, what are you guys working on? Like where are you guys in your guys' roadmap to actually capture and facilitate L2 scale?
Right. So I think we still are definitely working on all fronts. That's why I was saying we're a bit of like a different beast. So we have that whole proving team and the relayer who's generating these ZK snark proofs. They still have improvement to do. Then we have the actual protocol, what we could write in our ZK circuits. Now, as of a few months ago, AMMs are on our layer 2. So still improvements there. Maybe next will be a lending protocol or another type of functionality. So those are kind of the two pieces of the ZK rollup front, like the relayer and then the protocol written on top of it. And now we have this new layer of products, which is kind of new to us, but super important, is presenting this in a package to the user on like the Loopring exchange on web, which is an AMM and order book DEX and payment application where you can do everything gas free. And so just improving the products, which is a huge thing and quite different hat for us. And besides our Loopring exchange, we have the Loopring wallet, which is kind of another thing I know you guys are right on top of from Vitalik's recent episode on social recovery wallets. But Loopring kind of expanded its focus again and we have a mobile smart contract wallet, so the social recovery wallet with our ZK rollup baked in, which is kind of a dual, like a really two-pronged approach at like mass, mass market usability. So, fast and cheap, but also a product that doesn't scare you with a seed phrase and is like socially scalable and like usable there. So we're still busy on all those fronts: protocol, product, all that. Definitely, it's only getting busier now that we actually have real users and real volume. $250 million worth of value on our ZK rollup, which is unbelievable for me to think about. I remember being discouraged, mid last year, saying, "Man, how hard is getting people on layer 2 going to be?" And by no means are we, hanging up our hat like we've achieved it all. We're just getting started. But it's just so nice to see real users, real volume. We're all grateful and really looking forward to continuing it.
Guys, I just want to capture that because Matt, 250 million in locked value on a Loopring. Look, guys, like a year ago at this time, we barely had that much locked in DeFi in our DeFi protocols, right? I mean, we just hit like the 1 billion mark in something like February of last year. So now that we've got like Loopring 250 million, that's huge. And, congrats to the team there, and congrats for pushing this vision forward. I just, this space moves so fast. It's unbelievable what you can accomplish in 6 months, a year's time. Very cool.
Thank you so much, by the way.
Let's turn to Justin with Synthetix. Justin, where are you guys in the development of your L2? Well, like what is that roadmap like? Where are you guys in that process, and where do you have left to go?
So right now the Optimism has a pseudo mainnet. So it's pseudo in that we're the only ones that can actually deploy right now. But plans are underway for a full real mainnet, right? And as Matthew said before, one of the great things about Optimism is it's generalizable. And I think to answer Ryan's question before about like how real is this, I think a generalizable way to start deploying contracts on L2 that's very, very similar to deploying on L1. You need your own compiler that's basically like a superset of the Sol C compiler, and you just switch your provider to Optimism, and away you go. You need a bit of wrapped ETH in there instead of Ether, and it's pretty much bang bang. You can actually deploy on L2, and I think that knowing that that's coming, around the corner this year is going to be pretty huge. It's going to pave the way for lots of developers who may not want to sort of get into the nitty gritty of actually trying to get into ZK Snarks to be like, I just want to be able to write contracts the way I always have and deploy it in something a lot faster and cheaper. In terms of our roadmap, so we're right now at a situation where not quite as much as Matt. I think I just had a quick check now. There's about 160 million right now of USD value of SNX. It's on our layer 2. Which is probably even more than perhaps we want, considering it's a phase 0. So right now, what we have is some stakers. You can stake your SNX on layer 2, but the SUSD that is what happens is when you stake on Synthetix, you basically mint the stablecoin. The SUSD that's on layer 2 is basically useless. The capital you can't do anything with the capital right now. There's no other protocols on there. There's nothing else you can do, and yet there's still $160 million of value on there, which is pretty wild. The Synthetix DAO is sending 25,000 SNX a week to distribute among people who are staking, but that's it. And yet there's still a lot of value. So clearly, people are really excited to get off paying gas on layer 1. Our next phase is to basically enable basic exchanging. So probably have like having Ether and Bitcoin. And actually being able to slowly, hopefully, if we get some other protocols on there, actually do something with these synths as opposed to just having them static sitting on layer 2. But for us, a big part of the excitement is as other teams and protocols do develop, as Matt was saying, like as other teams do start developing different things and they're on layer 2, well then we can get those DeFi Legos plugged in, and that's something that we're also pretty excited because as you can probably infer, once you sort of take away 15-second block times and a bunch of other requirements, all of a sudden new ideas of things you can do start to pop up. So
Justin, I just want to be clear. Oh, sorry, just one thing. Justin, I just want to be clear on this because this would have felt like a miracle in 2017. What you're saying is your team and what you've done with Synthetix on optimistic rollups right now is living proof that generalized smart contracts work in a rollup now. Like that works right now. That's what you're telling
That
us,
works. So what we basically, like, just to get a little technical, just because I find this useful, instead of just sending, tokens, right, from layer 1 to layer 2, we're actually sending messages, bytes 32 encoded messages. We take users' escrow entries, because when you stake with SNX, every week you claim and you earn SNX that's escrowed. We're taking this payload and actually sending it off to layer 2 and recreating the state that existed on L1, and now we're recreating on L2. So we can actually create this. These generalizable messages, you can actually send data, and you can do it both ways. But as you obviously know, that there's that 1 week withdrawal period, which is very onerous. Now, for us, as Robbie mentioned, we're talking fungible tokens, so it's not a big deal. You can have a market maker come and basically solve the problem of liquidity by, if it's SNX or it's SUSD or something else, they can basically sit there on both sides and provide liquidity. But yes, we do have a generalizable solution. It's just right now, oh, sorry for the noise. It's right now, not anyone can deploy to it yet, but there is a solution coming soon where anyone can actually deploy to it and write their code in Solidity, transpile it using the OVM compiler, and then deploy, as I said, using a regular provider. Because the thing that the Optimism team are really big on, and I really commend them for, is not reinventing the wheel and just leaning on as much of standards and developer tooling that everyone's used to. So there's no magical this or magical that. Everything tries to be as much EVM compatible as possible. Now, of course, it's more complex because of fraud proofs and things like that, but they really try to make it as compatible as possible.
Justin, do you happen to have any sort of like napkin math as to how much gas you've been able to save your users, or perhaps like what percentage of Synthetix economic activity you've been able to offload? Any numbers like that you could give us?
I don't have it on my head, off the top of my head, but I think it's something in the order of like 2 orders of magnitude difference. Like, so a 500K gas transaction ends up being about 5K gas. If you think of it, like what the roll up is really what is persisted onto layer 1 is effectively the 2 things. For every transaction, there's the call data. So the things that, the inputs of the function call, and then the Merkle hash, right, of the state. And they're the only 2 things that are actually persisted on layer 1. So every time someone transacts, those 2 things have to eventually get pushed onto layer 1. So it is about like 2 orders a magnitude difference in terms of gas. Now, it's a little hard to compare what's happening on layer 2 right now to 1, just because right now the gas is being basically paid for. The users aren't paying for it right now, just during this pseudo mainnet. So it's hard to really say what's, how many people are actually, how much of this is real activity. As we all know, people are a bit different when it comes to their own money versus when something's free.
Just to go a little bit deeper into that, Synthetix has one of the most vibrant communities in all of Ethereum. It's kind of the thing that you guys are known for. It's the Synthetix communities, what I would say brought Synthetix through the bear market and into the mainstream knowledge as we know today. I would imagine that the demand for scale must be absolutely massive inside of your community. What can you tell us about community interest in accessing this L2? Like, when you guys open up the door, is there just going to be a flood of people that move on to this L2, or have you guys done any sort of like consumer research in this domain?
Sorry, you're talking about our users, or you're talking about other developers, like another protocols?
Your guys' users who want to move on to the Synthetix L2 to stake.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, a lot of them really want to see, a real trading app. Like Matt was saying before, they want to see, ticking prices. They want, to get their orders filled immediately. They want atomicity. They want all the things that we can't provide right now on L1. So yeah, 100%. I see people going over there. Now, of course, the question of how useful is the capital that you mint or the things that you have on L2 is going to be an issue. So we will have to see, what else appears on Optimism. And then if not, what other solutions to, as I said before, to get your SNX or your synths back to layer 1 and play with them if you need to. I think that's still a bit of an open question right now. We need to see where that sort of comes to fruition. But it seems like, based on what I said before, the amount of rewards that are being sent onto layer 2 are pretty minuscule. And yet we still have, something in the order of, I said, like 160 million, like 6.6 million SNX, right? Which is, what is that? I don't know.
6.6 times roughly $25. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I meant the total supply. Like I don't have the total supply off the top of my head, what number that is, but you know, like 3% or something, yeah, which is pretty significant considering.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Fantastic work. And really exciting because you just released kind of the layer 2 optimism, like what, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, something like that. I don't know. Time moves in a different way.
Yeah, it feels like about 3 months. Actually, I think it might have been a month ago actually now.
A month ago. Okay.
Month
ago now.
Yeah.
Thanks for the time adjustment. Time is weird for me right now these days in crypto. Okay. Robbie, same question to you, right? So you represent the NFT side of these applications, and NFTs are having an absolutely massive moment so far in 2021. This is going to be an absolute breakout year. Like it seems so obvious, but same questions to you. How real is layer 2 for NFTs right now? Like hit us with the truth.
Yeah. Building a layer 2 for NFTs is really hard, especially compared to ERC20s. NFTs are fundamentally antithetical to liquidity. If you have 8.5 million Gods Unchained NFTs, you have 8.5 million order books. Each of those could have their own Uniswap market. It's nuts. Like they literally have their own bids, asks, and spreads.
And Robbie, just so people can understand this is almost like, you know, like obviously fungible tokens are things we see in the real world, like coins and dollars, and these things are fungible.
Yeah.
But NFTs, they're more like collectibles. They're individual items, like things you might find in a pawn shop in the real world, right? So of course, each NFT is completely unique. You can't trade one NFT with another, and that's why you're saying they each represent a separate order book almost.
And each NFT needs to find the right buyer, right? Like there's not a global buyer for NFTs in the same way that there's a global buyer for dollars or gold or coins.
Because they're fungible. Each of these, you know, goods is unique. What I think, and I steal this from Jesse Walden, who's a great thinker on the NFT space, is DeFi is as to financial services as NFTs are to literal assets in the real world, like cars, options contracts, physical goods, term deposits. Heaps of stuff in the real world are unique, and that's what financial services exist to serve. So I think fundamentally we're seeing the innovation of tokenization of everything, the final stage, and that's why this space has gone nuts. We have Mark Cuban making NFTs of him tweeting cameos. We have major IP pouring into different partnerships. The amount of people who have reached out to our company over the last 3 months is 20-fold over the previous year. So the space has been insane. It's really difficult to provide scalability, which is why Flow went off and said, hey, we can do a good competing business to Ethereum by carving a niche out of NFTs. And this is why I'm quite excited to say that within 6 weeks from now, the first ZK L2 transfer of an NFT will occur on Immutable X, and people will be able to do that. So it's definitely here. I've done demos where we're doing testnet integrations with basically partner applications, because the goal of Immutable X is, like, honestly, it's two things. One, I want to make NFTs huge, and I want the future home of those NFTs to be on a blockchain which is good, infrastructure which is open. Frankly, that's Ethereum right now. You need to use its security fundamentally. And so the way I want to do that, people should just trade where they want to trade. They want to trade on OpenSea. I want to make OpenSea the most amazing place to trade ever and have those guys be hugely successful. People want to trade in Fortnite and have an API and just trade in that marketplace. They should be able to do that and have all the benefit of Ethereum level security. So yeah, we've been working hard on this for nearly 1.5 years now. We're stoked to be able to release it at this time.
So Robbie, because we've heard a little bit of this from the other two panelists about sort of the before and after, right? They described like kind of the current state on the mainnet if they had their app, their app exists on the mainnet versus now, and it's world with faster UI, better experience. Can you kind of describe the before and after for somebody who is, using NFTs today or trading NFTs today on mainnet versus when Immutable X goes live? What's the difference? How's a user going to feel this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the main difference is they pay zero gas ever. If you're a game developer, you pay zero gas to create an NFT, to mint one. If you're a user, you pay zero gas to trade an NFT. It's on a validity proof, so you have the same level of security as Ethereum always, which is fundamentally the point. It's the reason why we're good for Ethereum down the track. If NFTs become huge, if L2s become huge, we're not taking value away from the fundamental chain. That's really important to me. Otherwise, you can't get Ethereum supporters on side. Otherwise, you're essentially just competing at the end of the day. So that's the user experience. The other thing is we're working with Starkware to make it so if you have layer 1 ETH, you don't even have to deposit that. So really, I want the minimum experience to be identical to current thing. You pay an ordinary gas fee, you use your layer 1 ETH. The best experience to be, hey, I've literally just signed a transaction. I see this NFT in my account instantly. It feels like magic. Like it legitimately feels like magic after 3 years of spending, oh, will this come in 2 minutes? Will it come in 10 minutes? Am I paying $45 to trade a $1 Gods Unchained card, which is just crazy. So I think the demand is, it's gone from being a vitamin to a painkiller for NFTs is the way I describe it. And right now it's gone to being general anesthetic, the state of NFTs.
So Robbie, I want to pin you down here because I have a Gods Unchained deck that I enjoy playing with, but I'm far from a professional, and so I would like to use the marketplace to bolster my deck. But I remember that it would cost, like you said, it would cost me $5 or $10 to get this card that was worth $3. So when do I get to use the NFTX marketplace to purchase all the Gods Unchained cards that I want?
Yeah, our goal would be, for Gods Unchained, we'll roll it out first in Q1. So within 6 weeks, you can create a prediction market on that. I'll bet for it.
Awesome. Fantastic. All right. So I think that unless Ryan, you have any other questions you want to follow up here with this section, I want to turn to the conversation of composability, because this is a frequent topic of concern that many people have when it comes to L2, which is, well, if Loopring gets all the liquidity on the Loopring L2 and Synthetix has the liquidity on the Synthetix L2, well, then we're fragmenting liquidity. And now that we're all on separate L2s, we're all multiple hops further away from each other than we once were, right? So let's start with Matt. Like, how are you guys addressing this concern of fragmented liquidity and broken composability? What are you guys doing to help mitigate this issue? And or do you even consider this an issue?
Right. For sure. This is it's a huge thing. We haven't had to deal with it practically because we're the only ones. So we've, people kind of jab at this potential weakness in layer 2, and oh, you're all going to be in silos. And again, especially Loopring, because Loopring ZK-Rollup is quite application specific. We have the DEX, we have the AMM, we have the payments, but like we're not trying to get like we wouldn't have been a solution for Gods Unchained. Like we couldn't have told Robbie, hey, build on Loopring, because we're not trying to, like Starkware power their other applications. So we're not, inviting other teams necessarily to come build, and we're gonna, hey, tweak our back end to optimize for you and stuff like this. So we're kind of doing our thing, which is kind of it's an interesting statement to say, because, everything as Ethereans, all of us, we do is so open. But yeah, the Loopring, and this kind of goes back to your other question. Did you ever look at alternative L1s? To some extent, layer 2s do become a bit of a silo. You're there and you have to kind of make a transaction to go into there, make a transaction out. And it could be as instant or not instant, depending on ZK rollups or optimistic rollups. But I mean, at the best case scenario, then you're in a rollup with other people. So Synthetix, you're in a rollup where there's other stuff going on, and then it becomes kind of similar to layer 1. Synthetix might have plenty of company, probably will have plenty of company on Optimism. I'll let Justin speak to that. And then you kind of have those same composability, those great properties. To go cross rollup, there's a new, now this is the next frontier, cross rollups, right? We all know rollups are here, so how will we go across? Will it be easier for maybe validity proof to validity proof rollup? So like, will I be able to speak more easily to Robbie or to another Starkware application because it's Loopring ZK-Rollup to another ZK-Rollup? Can we also go equally as easy to optimistic rollups? So this is the next frontier. there's a few projects working on that. There's Connects, there's Hop, which came out recently. So to be honest, we largely leave that to these new solutions to come. We speak with them, we ask them questions, they ask us questions, but we're not trying to solve composability ourselves. We are trying to build the best kind of environment and products that we can on Loopring ZK-Rollup. And we kind of take it for granted that really smart people, our peers, are going to figure out to build bridges. You know, and everything, again, rooted, the most crucial thing, rooted in Ethereum security. So if liquidity providers have to bridge an exit from Loopring and entrance onto Synthetix or onto Optimism, then that liquidity provider at least has the assurance that like this is all Ethereum level security guarantees. They don't have to have a mental space for this side chain that has 7 validators, right? So like all these rollups, at least they're speaking the same language, and they know like the fallback is Ethereum layer security. And then it's just like talking about what is the market rate on their liquidity to front you 1,000 DAI exiting Loopring and then and crediting you that on Optimism. What do I need for that? Do I need 50 basis points for the hour? Like it becomes a financial consideration, which clearly Ethereum has excelled at figuring out these amazing new models and things like that. So it's going to be solved, I guess, with a mix of technology and financial innovation and just like the market rate for liquidity, which sounds maybe like not such a huge thing, but that's how composability is going to work. Maybe like the equivalent of flash loans, right? From one to the other. And I guess we still are thinking about it in the sense that like we have conditional transfers. So I could make a message on that is contingent on a layer 2 and a layer 1 action, right? So like, again, fronting this liquidity and being in 2 places at once. So if I do something on layer 2, then I take that message and then it allows me to do something on layer 1. We do support these conditional transfers. Those are a big thing. That's what our fast withdrawals are based on. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's I think a lot is to be seen. Like I really have a big chunk of this. I just don't know how it's going to play out. There's still technical pieces to fit in place. There's behavioral pieces to fit in place. Like how often will people be leaving their rollups? Right. And then again, it's the ZK versus optimistic exit timing. It's just there's a lot of unknowns here, but it's clear that the work is being done, and it's a mix of technical and financial, and composability will remain. But it's if I have to say kind of one thing, like, you know, that's okay, let's assess a risk here. Composability is not as beautiful as everything being on layer 1. That's for sure. But we're gonna get over that hump.
Justin, I'd like to pull you into this conversation. One of my long-term optimistic cases for Loopring is that Loopring is a place that will be able to take fiat, take a fiat on-ramp, right? And so let's say I transfer my 100,000 whatever dollars into Loopring, and then I start trading SNX, right? Buy, sell SNX to use the Loopring L2, and then say I've got my SNX bag filled, and now I want to take that SNX bag and maybe I also have SUSD on Loopring as well. Maybe there's both SNX and SUSD on Loopring. But now I want to go into the Synthetix ecosystem. I want to reprice my SUSD debt. And if in the current form of things, without the theoretical financialization market makers that Matt was just talking about, I would have to exit out of Loopring, which would be one transaction. It would take some time. It would be a little bit more gas intensive than a basic L1 transaction. Then I would have to go into the Synthetix Optimism L2 in order to do some of the activity going on there. And that would also take another transaction, and it also takes some time. How do you see some of these frictions being smoothed out and down the road?
Look, I think Matt's right. It's like the next frontier. I mean, to take a slight step back, like sharding, horizontal scaling is where we're going. Like this is Ethereum. Like it doesn't matter what we want to say and label this L2. Like this is inevitable. Like we have to do something. And I don't think there's gonna be one solution, as I said before. And we're all coming to a loggerheads of trying to figure out how the hell are we going to do this stuff. I mean, you mentioned there, David, the cost of gas and stuff, and of course that's going to be unpleasant. Maybe as Matt said, there'll be a way to connect the dots between one roll up to another roll up, and I can see that being possible. I don't see how that's going to come out generalizably, but maybe. I don't really have a great answer for you, but I mean, I guess for us, like our attitude and our kind of ethos has always been, let's just iterate. Let's throw things out. Let's see what sticks. Let's get MVPs out there. Let's see what people want and use and go with it. So I wish I had a better answer, but we're looking towards, as I said before, market makers who could help get the assets back out quickly. But to talk to another L2, it feels too early to really have a good answer to that right now. I'd be curious if anyone else has thoughts.
I want to ask you kind of two follow-up questions, but the first is this, in putting kind of the technical hat on that you wear all the time. I've heard some critics say, well, if you break composability, you're not really solving Ethereum's scalability problem, right? And what they mean is that layer 2 is not actually solving scalability, because the beautiful thing about Ethereum layer 1 is that all of the applications are composable. So now you're just like fragmenting it. So I've heard critics say that. What's your response to that? Do you think that this is true scalability, or do you think because it doesn't preserve some of the nice atomic transactions between all of the DeFi money Legos on Ethereum that we're losing something and we're not truly scaling Ethereum? What's your response to that?
I mean, I think we are losing something, and I mean, Matt said the same thing. Like it would be great to stay at L1, but I think we've just hit the limits of what we can really do. Potentially, there's some innovation in the future that can fix this, but we've had a lot of smart minds on this problem, and it seems like we're back to this idea again as horizontal scaling. So I think the best thing we can do as protocols is to create such a system where potentially, if need be, we might even need to be able to deploy ourselves on different layer 2s and find ways that we can bridge. So maybe the solution to that problem before that David mentioned is we find a way to deploy Synthetix, version Synthetix on Loopring that can interact very nicely with Loopring, and then we have a way to bridge that gap from their layer 2 to our layer 2. But at the end of the day, like if we can't find a nice way to do it, like to go from one layer 2 to another layer 2, then yeah, we do break, to some degree, we do break composability. And I guess I don't really have much else to say on that one.
Well, so here's my other follow-up to this, Justin, is because Synthetix interacts with a ton of the other DeFi protocols in Ethereum today. So I remember when Dave and I were talking to Kane about this on a Community Ask Me Anything, and he said, hey, you know what Synthetix is doing? We're moving out of Manhattan and we're going to Brooklyn. And we asked the question, okay, Kane, how are you going to get the other DeFi protocols to come to Brooklyn with you, right? And he was like, well, we're going to make Brooklyn freaking awesome, and everyone's going to want to be there. So my question to you, Justin, is like, as part of solving this composability, you've got with optimistic rollups, you've got this essentially almost like a DeFi chain, right? It can host the other DeFi money protocols. But my question is one of coordination. How do you get everyone else to come to Brooklyn with you? What are you seeing along those lines?
I mean, I think what L2 is really offering, Optimism is really offering is the ability to tinker, to play. L1 has become prohibitive. Now, yes, of course, you could tinker on Kovan or Gurley or any other testnet, but L2 provides the ability to tinker, and I think that's exceptionally powerful. I think perhaps people who aren't engineers don't underestimate the importance of that. Having a playground where you can actually start putting things out there and actually working. I think that I expect to see lots of interesting innovation happen on layer 2. Now, the big protocols, some of them are probably sitting there thinking, what do I do? Do I wait for a better generalizable ZK? Do I join Optimism? And my response to them is like, you should be thinking about this regardless. And I don't see why you shouldn't be considering ways to potentially fragment, right? Potentially fragment. I don't see why they wouldn't try and do this. Like now, yes, there's cognitive overhead, but again, I think that the writing's on the wall that we need to do something. Now, Kane's probably more, well, I wouldn't say fashionable. I'm the one who used to live in Brooklyn. He lives in Sydney, hardly the most fashionable city in the world. Sorry, Robbie. Well, the Robbie is in the best part of Sydney, I think. Sorry, girls, but one of the best. But but yeah, I mean, we definitely have been talking to lots of other protocols. Have been, have been asking us and talking to us, and like, we want to get on there. I mean, but they all have their own concerns. Like, let's say a money market goes over there, like, Compound or AAVE, then they're going to be like, okay, well, we're splitting up our, might be like, well, we're splitting up our, liquidity. We have liquidity over here and liquidity over there, and how do we do it? These are particular problems that these guys have to do, but we've seen lots of demand. Lots of people have been asking us and reaching it through us and trying to get out and, and get on there. And right now, as I said, unfortunately, only Synthetix are able to deploy. So I see it coming. I mean, I see it being a pretty cool place, but I, again, don't think it's a be all end all. Manhattan still exists. And you know what? I'm not in New York anymore, but I hear Manhattan's starting to come back. It's becoming the new place because everyone's moved out. So the artists are coming back in. So,
There you go. Robbie, do you have anything to add to the composability discussion before we move to the next topic for the panel?
Yeah, just quickly, I think I have two things. The first one is that I think that, Justin is totally right. It's about making Brooklyn a playground, and a really exciting playground. We're going to have Cairo. You can build recreations of this functionality in Immutable X. The second thing to say is I think this is why NFTs is an interesting use case for L2. It's less about building that interoperability and more about how can you trade real assets on a blockchain with high security. And so I think that there's less of a critical need there. The third one, though, is I guess, like, what does a scaling Ethereum mean? Is it you are allowing the network effects of the community to be preserved interoperably? That's one definition. Is it you are allowing people to use the layer one settlement-based security as the security under which their logic is transacted? I think that's a really compelling definition. I think that's fundamentally what differentiates Ethereum from every other chain out there, because either way, they achieve either their security through a less secure mean via a consensus mechanism that's completely centralized, or their chain is just less valuable and therefore easy to attack. So I think that's my real question is, what does scaling Ethereum mean? And I think that it has to be on real layer twos. I don't mind if there's a bunch of fragmented layer twos. I think that's a great future for Ethereum, because at the end of the day, value is being consumed in the form of ETH proofs being paid on chain, and two, economic bandwidth is being increased because these assets are being transferred with the same level of security as Ethereum. So I would say it absolutely is, more so than any other solution. There's a reason that Vitalik said ETH is on rollups as the future. Centralized sidechains are a betrayal of ETH's values, literally quote from him. So I mean, if I'm taking any cue, I'm taking a cue from the guy who made it.
Yeah, and you said the magic words, at least for me, economic bandwidth. I have been, David and I have both been such a proponent of this term, because I do think that scalability is so narrowly defined if you just think about it in terms of transactions per second on the main chain, right? It ignores so many aspects of it. Ignores the scalability of the community, ignores the scalability of user experience, it ignores the scalability of economic security, and it ignores the scalability of trustless economic bandwidth. And when you have an asset like ETH, of course, that acts as a store of value, doesn't have any other centralized intermediary, and you're able to preserve that on a layer two, well, aren't you scaling? You are scaling trustless economic bandwidth, are you not? So I totally agree with that last point, Robbie, that we have to also broaden and expand the definition of scalability for these money systems. I think David is going to take the next question for the panel.
Yeah, speaking of money systems, the current form of getting value into Ethereum is you sign up with Coinbase, you sign up with Gemini, you buy your Ether, and then you get it deposited to your own Ethereum address, whether it's your MetaMask, your Ledger. But that's like you getting injected with like your first little amount of Ether, you're getting injected into the heart of Manhattan, where you don't really, like, things are scary. The L2 world is what really gets me bullish about the possibility of L2s, is that each individual L2 offers a unique on-ramp possibility into Ethereum, where if people are playing with like games on the Immutable X platform, what about the possibility of purchasing your NFTs with your credit card on the Immutable X. And all of a sudden there's some value flow from, the legacy world, the banked world into the Immutable X L2, which is, the next step into a bankless life. So Robbie, let's start with you. What kind of things could happen, or do you have in the works with, value flows directly onto the L2 that's not actually coming straight from Ethereum?
Yeah, that's the whole point. And I think that's why we almost have a separate idea to find more financial or DeFi L2s, is that what I specialize in is NFTs. That's obviously what we're trying to scale. And I think NFTs have the potential to capture an enormous amount of value in the real world. That's video game assets for one. There was $90 billion worth of in-game items, not box copies, literally the items sold last year to gamers. And they received $0 of real value. They could sell none of that. So I think that's a ripe market. Gamers are already digital natives, and we're already seeing, major companies starting to dip their toes into the space, whether it's the initiatives from Ubisoft, who, by the way, the main thing they care about, because the Ubisoft, blockchain team, ultimately the thing that scares them is, what if they put the Ubisoft brand name on something that ends up breaking, that asset is taken? And so they fundamentally care about security. That's why Ethereum is going to be the winner, because if you put World of Warcraft on a blockchain, you can't put it on a flow. You can't put it on a centralized sidechain which can't support that level of value. The 200 billion plus worth of economic bandwidth of Ethereum can. That's why I'm bullish. And 100%, the future is, it's not people interacting with apps and things. Maybe that's kind of a developer mindset, and that's where a lot of this value originates. It's, hey, this is a new asset for digital. This is a new standard for digital assets. If you interact with a game, what you expect from your ownership quality is that you can sell it. And you don't even need to know how the security works under the hood. You just know that, hey, these are the rights I get as a user. I pay with a credit card. I get these tradable properties. And yes, it's being minted into an L2 on Ethereum for free via an API called by that game's publisher. And then I see it going way beyond gaming items as well. I mean, NFTs have the potential to encapsulate the entire world's financial system outside of fungible tokens. Options contracts are unique financial contracts. Insurance contracts are based on the unique underlying circumstances of the home. We've seen digital art sell $100 million worth this year. We've seen sports moments being tokenized. It's this like fundamentally brand new world. And I think that world belongs in the infrastructure of Ethereum.
You'll love to hear it. Matt, when can I get my bank account injected into the fiat or into the Loopring L2?
Yeah, I'm glad to know that this is part of your bull case for Loopring now, as you said before. So I'll have to work harder on it. But yeah, I mean, this is, I guess, like a pretty boring topic. It's like, how much effort and how hard could we work on like regulatory things, right? Like, we've been squarely in Ethereum land for 3.5 years. It's nice that like we don't worry too much about regulation. I kind of hate having to muddy up the waters with thinking about fiat and different jurisdictions, and everything is just so much more simple on Ethereum, the global jurisdiction and stuff like that.
But so Matt, can I ask a question that gets at the heart of this? Like, so haven't the crypto banks like Coinbase and Gemini and even Binance to some extent already figured that out? Like, so why couldn't they just, rather than withdraw to Ethereum mainnet for my ETH, have a button that says withdraw to Loopring, right? And after I make my purchases, they're kind of the fiat bridge, the fiat on-ramp anyway. I just want an on-ramp directly from these crypto banks directly to Loopring, and they could solve the regulatory stuff for you. They already have that out of the box. How close are we to something like that? Or is there some challenge with that we're not seeing?
Right, great point. And this is, I guess, a business. So first of all, that can be done right now. They could have done that 6 months ago. Although now, I guess, gas fees sustainably high would be like a greater impetus on them, because either they're swallowing the high gas cost to give their user assets in a reasonable time, or they're passing it on to users for a $10, $15 withdrawal. So we have those conversations. I guess a kind of maybe unexpected business answer for Loopring specifically is, so they could just use our API and forget Loopring the exchange, the AMM. It's just this layer 2 where somebody could they can just throw some DAI across, and it goes to an Ethereum address, right? There's no special, you use your own Ethereum address on Loopring. There's nothing funky that needs to happen, just an API call, and it ends up in this address's kind of Loopring layer 2 shelf, which all they need is their Ethereum address to access. But what I was going to say is, it's a bit of a business case. Maybe some exchanges are reluctant to have some assets kind of pipe in to the Loopring system, because then we might eat their cake or eat their lunch a bit, like, right? It's like, why am I just zapping it into you where you are a Binance that cannot act evil? Like, why would Binance like pipe $1 billion of fiat through Loopring in a day when those users kind of could like, oh, maybe I want to get off here and and continue using Loopring? So I'm kind of, if this wasn't already in people's head, I kind of don't like saying it, because maybe now I've given them a reason to push back against us. But yeah, the truth is, like, yeah, sorry.
I see your point, Matt. And like, so maybe a Binance, because they have their ETH killer, the Binance chain, maybe they might be more reluctant to do something with Loopring. But it's like, let me bring Justin into this conversation here too, and get his thoughts on this. The Winklevoss twins are regular Bankless listeners, and they are very involved in GEMINI, the exchange, of course. Like, Justin, how do you get GEMINI to do a direct fiat on-ramp into the Synthetix optimistic rollup that you're building? Do you think that is the way forward to get fiat into the space, or do you have an alternative idea on that? What would you say to the Winklevoss twins if they're listening now?
Yeah, I mean, basically, we just need a way for these like centralized exchanges, for example, to get access to the tokens, right? Like, there's no reason why they couldn't. Once they know the addresses of the contracts, and they've got balances set up on layer 2 for their various wallets, it's easy enough for them just to send off. They could go, okay, there's access to SNX. They can. Right now we have SNX living on L2. Right now transfers are disabled because we're in the pseudo mainnet thing. But once the real mainnet comes along, there's no reason why they couldn't acquire SNX, have it set up on a certain wallet on L2, and then plug in a fiat on ramp, and off they go. Bob's your uncle. They can be like, okay, it's fiat, and then SNX. So
there's no technical reason that they couldn't just do that. And I'm just curious, Justin, your thoughts on maybe all there has to be is kind of an economic reason to do this, right? So in the very early stages of Ethereum, no exchange supported Ethereum, but as it grew, it became impossible to ignore. And is that sort of what happens with layer 2? I mean, Matt's here on Loopring with 250 million in total locked value. You guys have 160 million. If this is $1 billion or more, does this just not become impossible for exchanges to ignore? And they build those ramps naturally because that's where the economic value is. Justin, do you see it playing out like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same way, like, why they're listing why is Binance listing every token under the sun? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
To see people are trading it, like, you do it because that's what the market decides to dictate it,
Yeah.
It's really, we're just talking about developer cycles, right? So they've got to decide whether or not they want to invest the time, and what it's like to try to invest developer cycles. If there's enough suits saying we need to do this for money, then the developers usually have to get their total on. Okay, we do it.
So guys, we have a lot of folks that are into crypto investing. Obviously, they're bullish on various DeFi tokens. They're bullish on ETH. But there's a question, I think, of how layer 2 constructs might impact the underlying ETH value capture thesis. And I'm wondering, Robbie, if you have any thoughts on this. Are these layer 2 solutions value accretive to something like ETH, or are they value competitive? Do they take away from ETH's value proposition as a whole? Maybe we'll start with you, Robbie.
Short answer, L2s are the savior of Ethereum's price. They're the only thing holding back other scalability solutions who can offer UX that gives people the critical revenue they need right now, but fundamentally don't use Ethereum as a security or settlement layer from destroying us. And I mean, Flow raised $250 million the other day. Rowan was on Twitter saying, Ethereum's all great in that, but Flow is ready for mainstream NFTs. I don't think he's just trying to say that to mainstream NFTs. I think he's trying to say that he wants Ethereum to be zero and he wants Flow to be the dominant chain for all transactions. And he thinks NFTs are a good entry point to that. Now that's fine. If you want to use Flow, go ahead. You can also use my old laptop with a database and I'll run it for you for $2 million a year. But fundamentally, if you use the definition that you guys popularized, which is capital asset, which is a form of economic bandwidth, store of value, the only thing that means two things. One, you need to at some point consume ETH. If you're not consuming ETH, you are not providing consumable demand for Ethereum. Two, you need to rely on Ethereum as your layer one form of security. That is the definition of a layer two. By doing that, you increase Ethereum's value proposition via economic bandwidth. So quite frankly, I think any solution that is not a roll up on Ethereum right now is an ETH killer, is an ETH competitor. Even Polkadot, the way, and the reason that everyone's positioning themselves as not ETH killers is because it's a dumb thing to do. Like, I don't want to swear, it's like you're going to be hated by $200 billion worth of capital. It's not a smart move. So their positioning is, hey, we're synergistic. Hey, we're Polkadot. We're a parachain. We're doing this, and this. We're synergizing. It's crap. Just look at the fundamentals. Either you use Ethereum for your security and you consume it, you're good for its value, or you don't and you're not.
Oh my God. I really want to see the podcast where it's Immutable X versus Flow. I want to see kind of that debate sound off now that I've heard Robbie.
I'll have to be more polite.
Guys, Matt, Justin, any other thoughts on that? Value accretive? Matt, any comments?
Robbie is a great spokesperson for that. No, he's 100% right. Like, we kind of lose sight about what the label layer 2 means. Like, people say like anything scaling is layer 2, but yeah, it has to be strict. You have to inherit Ethereum security guarantees, which means you're paying gas. I like how he says it, it still remains a consumable. You're broadening the economic bandwidth because your little vertical, or once David, I was on here and he described Ethereum as like a pier, and then you go on to like your Loopring ride at the end, so these things, like the end of that pier is like its own little economy where, tokens are going in, so the bandwidth is, it's 100% accretive. And I do think it is just massively bullish. Roll-ups, yeah, like, we're talking ETH maximalism before. I'm a roll-up maximalist, and I'd even go so far, maybe just to more friendly jab here, but like I'm a ZK roll-up person. Like, I think ZK roll-ups are kind of like here now for the application specific stuff. Optimistic roll-ups are like right here, and they're going to allow the generalizable stuff. And then, ZK roll-ups kind of re-leapfrog when you have like the ZK snark and the advance, and then you do everything back in a validity proof way. But yeah, all this is it's just massively accretive. And I do, it's funny to hear Robbie say about like the way they're positioning themselves. I like to think that maybe I tried to coin something, I'm not sure, but like Ethereum killers are rebranding themselves as ETH enhancers. Well, they don't use that word, but I use that word. Everything must be an ETH enhancer now. Otherwise, it's just really, really stupid on you. I mean, we saw maybe a sound bite these past few days putting that in jeopardy, but from different chains, saying that there are no network effects, that somebody may laugh when he hears about Ethereum network effects, but you have to respect the network effect. You have to respect the network. It's massively accretive. I don't know if there's even a bearish interpretation. I haven't heard one of layer 2 for Ethereum. Besides the composability breaking, I don't see any kind of value. There's no leaky bucket where this kind of bypasses Ethereum accruing the value, in my opinion.
Justin, do you want to add anything to this conversation? Any thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with both Matt and Robbie, and Robbie quite very eloquently put forth his thesis that the layer 2 needs to be something that relies on ETH for security, which I think is a really nice way to put a point on it. I guess my main thought, and it's a bit more meta, is that one thing I really like about Ethereum is I feel like it's decentralized, of course, as Robbie said, but the way that it puts its money where its mouth is in terms of the way the EF supports, various implementations of the, the protocol, like, EVM, like here's a spec, go at it, right? There's, JavaScript, you have Rust, you have Go, and then the same thing with ETH 2.0, right? Let's go with Lighthouse, Prismatic, and I feel like we're at the same thing with rollups, right? Like here are different implementations of rollups and have at it. Like there is no one solution. There are just the specifications based on, security, and usability, and things. We are all sort of expected to try different things out, to iterate, and things will bubble up. The right things will bubble up, and I love that about Ethereum. Like I feel like there isn't this dictator down on high saying this is the way it needs to be. And credit to Vitalik, because he does a pretty good job of trying to stand back and let things evolve around him, rather than trying to maneuver and steer the ship.
You guys, this has been such a fantastic conversation. So thank you guys all for so much of your time and your insights. It's really valuable to me, and of course also to the listeners. And I want to finish up with this last final lightning question. So in just 2, 3, 4, just a few sentences, can you guys give us the maximally successful scenario of the long-term version of your app? So like when L2 is completely rolled out and also under the conditions of maximal global adoption, what does your app do when you have as much scale as you want and all of the things that you guys are trying to get done, you do get done? Justin, let's start with you.
The users can basically get a synthetic version of any kind of asset they want. Anyone around the world can take it and no one can stop them. Right, they get access to whatever they need whenever they need it, and as quickly as they can, and it doesn't cost them an arm and a leg.
Matt, what's the maximally successful version of Loopring?
Loopring outcompeting legacy fintech applications. We don't compete with each other on this call. I mean, some of us are not in the same verticals, but just any user can trade any Ethereum-based asset. So not Synthetix, not a synthetic asset, but just if it's on Ethereum, or actually we can trade Synthetix, but just trade anything, instant finality, super cheap, and payments as well, just complete freedom. We've started using the little slogan for our app, freedom at your fingertips. That is what Ethereum allows us. We can never misbehave. Nobody could take it from you. Nobody could stop you. That's what we hope Loopring becomes.
Matt, you must be bearish, because I was hoping in your answer you would have said the words Venmo, Robinhood, and central bank digital currencies. But I guess you're just focused on a little bit more meta level right there.
True. I wanted to keep it. Somebody actually brought it to my attention that on our site it says you probably read it, like Venmo and Robinhood and user experience. But then they said, do you still want to say Robinhood on there? Should you remove that? So, we haven't removed it yet. Give it all the stuff. But yeah, I'll leave it there.
Robbie, what's the maximally successful version of Immutable and Immutable X?
Yeah, I think it's the marketplace for all unique assets worldwide, or the exchange protocol.
That's it. Full stop. All right, you guys, this has been such a fantastic episode. Again, we have Robbie Ferguson, who is at the Immutable project, building out the marketplace for L2s for NFTs. We have Matt Finestone, business development at Loopring, the ZK-Rollups exchange and payments protocol. And of course, we have Justin Moses, CTO of Synthetix, leading the charge to deploy Synthetix on optimistic rollups. You guys, I think the listeners are really going to enjoy this one. So thank you so much for giving us your time and being here.
Thanks so much. Thanks,
Ryan.
Thanks,
you
guys.
guys.
All right, Bankless listeners, action items. If you want a primer on rollups, we just had Vitalik on the show, who gives a great overview of rollups in sort of layman's language. We will include a link to that in the show notes. We will also include links to Loopring, Immutable X, and Synthetix new Optimism L2, because here's the great thing. You can start using Layer 2 now, today. It's here, as our panel said. So start using it. You don't have to keep with on the mainnet and the gas fee transactions. We could start using Loopring, Immutable, and Synthetix now on layer 2. Also, David, last and final request. We want those bull market stars on iTunes. How are we doing on our 5-star ratings on iTunes, my friend?
We are always trying to do better than where we currently are at. As you guys listen to during this podcast, L2 is here, but yet people somehow don't realize it yet. And you know why? It's because we don't have enough 5-star reviews on iTunes.
That's why.
So
That's exactly why.
If you could, please go to wherever you listen to your podcast and give us those 5-star reviews. We're trying to get Bankless to the top of the iTunes business and investing charts so that everyone can hear the great gospel of Ethereum. So if you could please go ahead and do that, we would really appreciate it.
All right. If you care about L2, give us those 5-star reviews. That's what David said. All right. Risks and disclaimers, everyone. ETH is risky. So is crypto, of course, as is DeFi. You could lose what you put in, but we are headed west. This is the frontier. It's not for everyone, but we're glad you're with us on the Bankless journey. Thanks a lot.